right, good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to Singapore. If you're in Singapore, that is. If not, it's good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Anyway, welcome to today's episode of the Singapore Fintech Festival Green Shoot series. As some of you already know, my name is Gabriel, your host for today's session. For those of you coming back, thank you once again for your support. We try and do this almost on a near weekly basis, where we cover a wide spread of different kind of topics in the fintech industry, right? Another thing as well is the Green Shoot series is supported by Temasek for this year, and we're very, very grateful for the consistent support. On to today's session. Today's session is proudly brought to you as well by Boxterra. Boxterra is a neutral hub connecting B2B marketplaces, service providers, trade associations, all this to simplify trade for small and medium enterprises, better known as SMEs. Boxterra was launched in 2020 as the commercialization of the business Sans Borders initiative right here by MES, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, together with IMDA, which is the Infocomm Media Development Authority. Right? Basically, all this is to enhance digital and financial inclusivity for all the SMEs around the world. Today, Boxterra is live with about 15 progressive platforms all around Asia and Africa, which totals more than 400,000 SMEs in our network. Well, enough from me. Here's a very quick introduction to what Boxterra is about.
The new normal brings about new problems, both for you and your customers. As the CEO of a B2B platform, you know this better than anyone. But the new normal has also brought you a new solution, a solution that will help you create value and solve the challenges your customers are currently facing. Introducing Boxterra, an open global network that connects your platform to other platforms and trade services, bringing your customers a new world of possibilities. This is what Boxterra can do for you. Let's take a closer look at Neha, one of your customers. Neha, like many others, owns a local business, a sundry store that sells daily necessities. With COVID-19, it's been difficult for her to get milk powder and other new products from her existing suppliers. Neha feels like she has no other options. Now let's reimagine Neha's story with Boxterra, the power of a global reach. By connecting your platform to Boxterra, you can give Neha options. Now, as Neha searches for milk powder, she is presented with a world of opportunities you have brought to her through the Boxterra network, all filtered to what she wants, all relevant to what she needs. Neha's options have just been extended with new suppliers on other platforms, both locally and globally. She is now able to find the right product for her customers, and more importantly, at the right price through you. By connecting your platform, Boxterra enables Neha to connect with other platforms beyond yours. It also doesn't stop there. Boxterra also helps overcome financing, logistics, and payment challenges faced by your customers. So connect to Boxterra today, and you will find that there is nowhere in the world that's out of reach. Boxterra, bringing the world to you.
All right. And to follow that on, everyone, our topic for discussion today is all about digital and sustainable procurement. And will SMEs lose out, right? Today's panel will be discussing the readiness of SMEs in their digital transformation journey, sustainability in enterprise procurement, and last but not least, actionable steps to make change a reality for SMEs. Today's session is open to online question and answers. Basically, if you look at your Q&A box, you can just put your questions right in there in the Zoom's function, right? And without further ado, please allow me to then introduce you, first and foremost, our moderator for today. That's Parul, who will be taking us through a very exciting conversation for the next 45-50 minutes. To give you a little bit of background, Parul is also the partner with PwC, where she leads the workforce strategy business in the region. Parul helps organize and capture opportunities with the workforce transformations and win in the new world of work. These days, she's also spending increasing time on organization and people levers to drive successful ESG outcomes. And now, Parul, over to you and fellow speakers. Thank you very much.
Good evening, good morning to everyone who's joined us from across the region and beyond. And thank you, Gabriel, Boxterra, and the SFF team for the opportunity to host this panel today. It's a pleasure to moderate today's panel, where we have speakers from a truly diverse range of backgrounds and experiences, including large enterprises, fintechs, and government agencies. The matter at hand is an important one. SMEs are the backbone of our economy, contributing very significantly to job creation and global economic development. The World Bank estimates that SMEs today represent about 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. With increasing trade digitalization and focus on sustainable development, there exists a plethora of opportunities waiting to be unlocked by SMEs. But really, are they ready? Today, I'd like to speak to our panelists on the role of technology in supporting SMEs in this journey, the creation of enabling ecosystems, the case for innovative business models, the need for transparency and trust in measuring sustainability outcomes, amongst other things. You can clearly see I'm rather eager to get the discussion started. But before we do that, let me introduce you to our panel for today. Our first panelist, Arundham Sengupta, joined Dole in 2018 with a mandate to lead and transform its global procurement organization. His responsibility is to develop strong partnerships and collaborate with suppliers, innovators, and SMEs, along with smallholder farmers in the region, to establish a cost-effective and resilient supply chain that can benefit all stakeholders. Next up, we have Kiran Kumar, who is the Deputy Chief Executive Development of the Infocom Media Development Authority. He spearheads the development of Singapore's digital economy and drives the implementation of ICT industry strategy. Kiran oversees both the Sectoral Transformation Group and Digital Industry and Talent Group to accelerate digitalization to grow Singapore's digital economy. Next, we have Lim Kang Song, who is the Chairman of Boxterra and has more than 3 decades of experience in the technology sector. Kang Song was also a member of the government task force, the Committee on the Future Economy, and the co-chair ICT Sector Tech Skill Accelerator, an initiative that aims to build and develop a skilled ICT workforce in Singapore's digital economy. And finally, we have Paul Marriott, the President of SAP Asia Pacific Japan. Paul is a technology veteran and established business leader with more than 25 years of experience in Asian economies. Paul is deeply passionate in advocating climate change, building an inclusive workforce, and bringing Asia to the forefront of global innovation. So welcome to all the panelists, and look forward to what promises to be a very, very interesting conversation today. I think the first point I wanted to bring about is the readiness of SMEs in their digital procurement journey. The economic uncertainties brought about by the global pandemic over the last year, and one that continues today, have only exacerbated some of the challenges that SMEs have faced when it comes to digital transformation. In a 2020 SME Microsoft study, for instance, 83% of SMEs in Singapore said that they have digital transformation strategies in place. However, despite higher adoption of digital transformation, only 2 in 5 SMEs believe that their efforts were successful. Cost remains a top barrier, of course, with just over half of Singapore SMEs saying that they found it too expensive to digitalize due to high implementation costs, in addition to other factors such as digital skills gaps and low awareness of government initiatives to support firms in their transformation journeys. So Arundham, my first question is at you. Large enterprises, of course, have been further ahead in their transformation journeys. Learning from your organization's success, what do you think that SMEs can do differently?
Thank you, Parul. And first of all, thank you for having me over in this esteemed panel discussion. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think, we really see this as a big opportunity to collaborate with SMEs. Our transformation journey actually started with, the launch of the new Dole Promise to the world, where we said that our philosophy is whatever is good for the community, good for the environment, is good for the organization. And we wanted to recreate our brand and our purpose, which will be relevant for the next 100 years, because Dole is a 170-year company. So what is relevant for the new consumers, the future people who would actually consume our product? So that was very important. And everything was triggered by that thinking and that strategy and that vision around what do we do next. So our platform of the promise was based on 2 key things: sustainability and innovation. Okay, and of course it fits well with this discussion, and each of these will lead to a growth for us. in the future, reaching new consumers, pivot to new sustainable packaging, new sustainable products, reduce waste, reach more nutrition and health and wellness to more people in the world. Yeah, so it's a fantastic story of this vision creating growth opportunities for us, and as a result, creating growth opportunities for our partners, our suppliers, and all the SMEs that we collaborate with. Yeah, so while I believe that while the access to capital is there for large organization, but that enables the entire system to grow and partner with large organizations like us to chart their future. Yeah, so in short, it is a growth story. It is a big opportunity story.
Thanks, Arundham. And I think what really stands out to me is this deep connection to a larger purpose and the underpinning of innovation. Thank you for that. Paul, my next question is really at you. Speaking of innovation, there are certainly big opportunities in technology, right? What do you have to say about how SMEs can continue to leverage technology in better ways?
Yeah, and some of those data points you shared earlier are a bit disturbing, aren't they? Because I think everybody on the panel would agree, right, that it's crucial that SMEs do create better transparency in their businesses, given the times are so uncertain, that you do increasingly look at your business model in terms of how you differentiate your offerings to your customer. And also create, a sustainable business, which is now table stakes. So I think, digitally transforming is well understood, and those that are doing it are definitely winning. What we've got to do is obviously enable technology in SME to be more pervasively leveraged to drive that business model innovation, process improvement, create the agility that you need. So that's table stakes for sure. I think what's really interesting is the way in which technology, and I love the Boxterra video as it opened up, and I know Kang Song will talk about this, but the ability then for an SME to plug into a network. If you think about these networks, they're underpinned by intelligent technology that is creating that network and all of that connectivity for an organization to participate in. We all know that all of you out there are operating your businesses in an ecosystem through connections with other organizations that then ultimately deliver an outcome. And we see these networks, certainly for SAP, the investment in networks and connecting networks is crucial to allow that scale and global trade. And this runs into trillions of dollars of trade annually that's running through these networks. And it also gives us some really interesting ways of directing, for example, spend. So as an organization, you may want to direct your spend to certain categories of supplier. Could be more innovative suppliers in terms of what you're trying to achieve. You may be directing spend based on cost objectives, i.e. lowering cost, or increasingly to more sustainable suppliers or social enterprises. We at SAP, 5% of our global spend is always directed towards social enterprises, and the network is the way in which we can direct that, and that is absolutely underpinned by technology. So I think it gives you the transparency that you need in such uncertain times. It lets you look at how you differentiate your business model in terms of the products and services that you provide to your customers. It gives you scale so that you can participate through that network really limitlessly. And I think that presents a tremendous opportunity for all of the organizations to benefit from that. And the more that you instrument with technology, the more you can drive the ESG agenda. Because the biggest challenge in my mind of sustainability and ESG is, how do you get an end-to-end view of, say, a carbon footprint or wastage in your end-to-end supply chain? Some of that's internal to you as an organization, but of course with scope 2 and indirect participation in that business process, the transparency of, say, emission or waste is difficult to measure across the end-to-end supply chain. So what these networks also underpin is the ability to then drive circular processes, drive to zero waste, drive to zero emissions, drive zero inequality. And I'm very convinced that the technology is the foundation of enabling that for SME organizations.
I couldn't agree more, Paul. Kiran, my question next is to you. One of the things we saw in the study that I just quoted earlier was that a lot of SMEs in Singapore said that they don't really leverage existing government initiatives, for instance, that could potentially, or they don't have the necessary knowledge that is required to leverage these initiatives from the government. Coming from that perspective and from a developmental lens, what is your advice to SMEs on being able to capitalize on the opportunity, and what are the opportunities out there?
Great. No, thank you so much for having me, and a good afternoon to everyone out there who's dialing in. Parul, thank you for the questions, and maybe perhaps I'll build on some of the comments that my fellow panelists have already said. Let me start with a statistic. The digital economy for Singapore is going to be a top priority for us, and out of that broader plan, we have come up with 19 industry development plans, industry by industry. And the SME segment in particular is going to be a top priority for us, because that's one of the toughest segments for us to transform and digitize. Now, if you look at Singapore today, we have about 200,000 odd SMEs operating across different sectors. And you mentioned that 83% of SMEs have got some strategies in place. But we did a study over the last 3 years with BCG, and we segmented that further, and we found out that today about 36% of SMEs in Singapore are sort of categorized as digital literate performers or leaders. These are leading. So about a third of our SME segments are actually doing well, and it's driving their growth and revenue and global potential. So I think that's the good news. The bad news is that if you compare them to the larger companies, that same segment of literates and above is at 86%. So there's a lot of room for growth for the next tier of SMEs to digitize. Now, there are some sectors where SMEs are doing very well because they operate in sectors which are global and highly competitive. If you look at Infocom and media, finance, professional services, manufacturing, wholesale trade, for example, the SMEs in those segments are doing better than the overall average. But there are domestic sectors where actually a lot of SMEs are not doing that well. And this will be your F&B, retail, and many other segments like that. Now, if we dive deep into what came up from the survey, there are a couple of gaps of what's stopping the SMEs from digitizing at scale. One is, of course, they don't have the talent within. Two, they don't have resources and funding. And three is just a mindset for change and the space to change. Now, having said that, we have seen a significant acceleration of digitalization by SMEs in the last 1.5 years, in a way, thanks to a pandemic. Never waste a good crisis. And I think that's an opportunity for us. So now what are we doing about it? So beyond the plans, we've put in place significant amount of programs to address the gaps that I mentioned earlier. So one is we have a long-standing program called Sme Goes Digital. We have benefited about 70,000 SMEs over the last 3 years who have adopted ready-made solutions, plug and play, and get on with business to get onto digital products and software as a service, for instance. We have pre-approved with IMDA more than 300 technology solutions where SMEs can plug and play because they don't have the technology to build. They just need to buy and then change. So that has been a fairly successful program. And only in the last 1 year, we have seen more than 40,000 companies come on board. So that digital acceleration is helping us to reach out to more SMEs. So I think that's one. The second one is that we are working on sector-specific initiatives to see how can we work with platform companies like your Grabs, your Shoppies, and your Googles of the world to bring on SMEs in retail, in e-commerce, and to see how they can actually help these companies digitize at scale, because it is a need, it's no longer a want. In the future, we are thinking of a program for slightly more advanced SMEs that have already digitized, but they want to go to the next level. How do we create a CTO as a service? Think of it as a central kitchen for tech advisors that many SMEs can use centrally, so that we lower the cost, but also lower the frictions that it takes for mid-sized companies who want to bring it to the next level. And also, we are working quite closely in terms of how do we develop talent for the broader ecosystem. You may have seen a lot of programs that we are training Singaporeans at scale for the tech job needs, but these are tech skills that are needed across the economy, not just for the tech sector. So we are working with the likes of Google, Grab, and many others to see how can they overtrain with skills that are needed for SMEs. Because SMEs are not in a position to hire someone and train. They need someone who is ready to go with certified skills to actually go to the next level. So we are having various interventions around this space to see how we can bring this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran. And that's, I think, incredibly inspiring to see the work that's been done very proactively. One of the things that I am gleaning from what I've heard so far is a significant focus on a collaborative ecosystem, right? We're talking about large enterprises, we're talking about technology organizations, we just talked about the government. Thanks. My next question is to you. How do you think other stakeholders, so for instance, financial service providers in the ecosystem, can actually empower and uplift SMEs in this area?
Let me just say good afternoon to everyone first. Okay, thanks, Paru, for the question, and it's a privilege to join this particular session. I think thanks for the marketing video on Boxterra earlier on. I think our biggest contribution to this will be by fostering collaboration via open innovation, right? Boxterra, we promote market-led innovation by connecting SMEs with enterprises, such as Dole, for example, seeking sustainable solutions, right? So I think that's a part that we can play. Apart from the initiatives like what Arundham has described, what Dole is doing, right? In terms of how do they encourage suppliers down the supply chain to innovate and to provide more sustainable solutions, and the conversation just now that Kiran was having, like industry developers like IMDA, how do they encourage? How can they encourage SMEs to do rapid development of new solutions while validating the market needs, right? So I think those are the brief thoughts that I have.
Thanks a lot, Kangson. I think just going a little bit further, Arundham, I wanted to ask you, again, very inspiring story there from Dole. Given the focus on sustainability at Dole, how do you think large enterprises can collaborate more effectively with SMEs to build capabilities that are required for sustainability-led innovation? How do you help them achieve their ESG outcomes and build eventually greater supply chain resilience?
Thank you, Parul. Very important question. You see, Dole is present from farm to retail. Okay, so at every part of our value chain, there is sustainability involved. Yeah, and sustainability may mean different things in different parts of the value chain, although overarchingly there are some key parameters that we measure on. Okay, so if you look at, for example, just to let you know, and not many would be aware that 30% of the pineapples that we grow in our farms or we buy from the farmers are wasted in the farm because they are either not good looking or they have some superficial defects, for example. Even in the farm, there is issues around forecasting, and having a technology-led, forecasting model where we know exactly how much is coming when, etc. So just as an example, we are actually collaborating with 2 Singaporean companies to be able to develop, satellite and drone-based forecasting model, to be able to give that facility to the farmers, to be able to forecast their productivity and their supply to us and reduce wastage in their farms. And we also have much more surety of supply that builds resilience into our supply chain, and we know a better outcome. Yeah, so that was just an example. Whether it is manufacturing where we are developing control tower systems, or whether it is shipment where we are again developing logistic solutions where we can predict the ripening of the fruit inside the containers itself, etc. So all those things are actually triggering a lot of collaboration. Yeah, because this capability is not there in-house. It has to be done through network, through collaboration, through integration with our key partners and suppliers across the value chain. Yeah. So I think, this is where we are. And we are very excited to see this development where you are actually, there is this network being built by Boxterra, where we can access talent, access skill, access innovation and capability from outside, and then we work together in a collaborative way. So I think there's a lot of huge opportunities there that we are looking at.
Absolutely, Arundham. And I think that just the power of that network and the power of cascading effects that happens from there, I think is really, the potential is still untapped. I think a lot more is to come there. Well, there was something that you said earlier that triggered a question for me. You did talk about transparency and trust when it comes to sustainability and climate action efforts, right? There definitely has been an erosion of trust in the area of ESG due to greenwashing and other challenges that we have been seeing recently. How can SMEs leverage technology to instill trust in stakeholders and to drive greater focus on outcomes rather than just intent?
Yeah, good question. I just want to comment on something Arundham said, though. This concept of the large companies in the marketplace being the catalyst for that innovation, I think that's a great example, what Dole's doing. And we see industry by industry, these larger, automotive's a great example, where you see these large automotive companies creating the catalyst, and then the layers that form in that network to create that ecosystem opportunity, and that seems to be what really stimulates the innovation. So sorry, just building on what was said earlier. In terms of your question about ESG and some of the challenges, greenwashing and so on, I think it comes back to what I think one of the most important things that technology enables is transparency, and technology now is so advanced that the ability for it to attest and provide guarantees in terms of how things have been done are extremely high. Blockchain is a great example. We incubated a small company that facilitates ethical sourcing. It's called Green Token, and it uses blockchain technology to look at right through the supply chain, literally from where a product is farmed and sourced all the way through to when it arrives in a supermarket or ends up on someone's table at home, that a consumer can see that end-to-end process with full transparency and with technology that's attesting to the quality of that ethical sourcing. So I think the tech is so advanced that it allows you to build that transparency. That then creates trust with stakeholders, whether that's within the private sector or within government. And of course, we're seeing governments increasingly looking at expectations around the ESG frameworks that they're expecting organizations to adhere to. Investors as well. It's great in Singapore that we have a sustainability index now, which is looking at organizations where green investment has been driven. But again, for the investors, they want to see and have assurances around the transparency of the ESG status and ambitions of those organizations. So everything for me comes back to, how do you create transparency? How do you use the technology to create that assurance, to attest that you get that accuracy and build then that confidence, so that what you're looking at is accurate, that it has an audit trail with blockchain technologies or whatever it is, to then build that confidence, into the ecosystem. Because so many people are participating in that process, it's crucial that you get that transparency running through all of the organizations in the ecosystem that are participating. So I think this is emerging. It's not there today at that level that I'm describing, but I do think the innovation that we have is enabling us to get to that point. It's feasible to do it. We now need to coach, support, and encourage the SME sector to take advantage of that.
Right. Thanks, Paul. I do agree. I think the There is an enabling infrastructure. There is significant activism, both from consumers and investors, that will keep us on the straight and narrow. So I do believe that, there is significant potential on trust and transparency as we move forward. I think in the spirit of what I was saying a little bit earlier is moving from intent to outcomes. I wanted to leave this sort of to the panel, not addressed to anyone in particular, but what is your vision for a thriving SME landscape in the future, one that is digitally transformed, one that has sustainable procurement practices? What is that vision in your mind?
Is that to any one of us in particular, or anyone to go first?
Anyone who goes first, fastest finger first.
I don't mind jumping in. I'll let my colleagues also, I'm sure, comment. So I think actually one of them, and I think it was Kiran, you were describing the CTO as a service was a great example. I think one of the most important things that we do, and it's where large organizations and governments, I think, can play a really important role, is how do we coach and support SMEs at scale to enable these technologies? And CTO as a service is a great idea, and that digital skilling to enable then SMEs at scale to take advantage of that technology. Clearly, cloud as a delivery mechanism has opened the door for significantly more scale. But I think firstly, we need scalable ways of coaching and supporting organizations. And my colleagues on the panel, we're working together to create that type of environment for SMEs. I think we should award and recognize then that success as much as possible to build confidence and momentum. There is no doubt that while that data point you started with, I think only two out of five are successfully digitally transformed. What I am very confident about is that the two that have will definitely be reaping the rewards. They will definitely be getting the growth. They will definitely be getting the agility in their business to continually innovate and stay ahead of their competition. The trick for us is how do we get that to the third and fourth and fifth SME that in that data point, didn't get the successful digital transformation. So I think cloud just enables the availability of the technology, but it needs to be combined with those coaching and support services that the larger organizations can bring to the table, CTO as a service, but many other things that we can do. And then rewarding and recognizing that success as a mechanism of creating the catalyst. And then the only thing I would say is back to that network is how do the big companies then create that catalyst through those tiers that participate in that network? Yeah. I think that's the other thing that is crucial to get the scale.
Can I chip in another point of
Please
view?
Go.
So Kiran has suggested and he has talked about the CTO as a service. I think that's an amazing idea. We from Boxterra standpoint, we would like to table another SaaS, if you will, right, which is internationalization or regionalization as a service, right? Because I think companies that are already digitized, right, got to stand up and claim the birthright into the digital economy, right? They are doing themselves no justice by participating only in the business within their locality or within their neighborhood or within their local markets. So that ability to scale, right, through a platform like Boxterra, right, will enable them to become a fully fledged member of the international business community. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective, not a different, but an additional perspective. I'm a great believer of open source versus a fortress model. Okay, so typically, when we see every company has their own sustainability agenda, they invest quite a bit of capital in developing a framework, developing KPIs, measuring them across their value chain, working with consultants and other partners. But I think there is a belief that trying to build this very uniquely for themselves will create a competitive advantage. I think the time has come to think about a more open sourcing model where actually if you have created something which is great and which is working, because as Paul mentioned, the challenges of measuring sustainability from intent to action is around disclosure, is technology led, how do you capture this data across all your partners and their value chains, etc. So once you have created a model, can you actually open it up for the ecosystem to access and then standardize how it is being measured across the industry or across certain verticals that will benefit either the country or the region in a big way? And how can government facilitate that discussion? So I'll give you an example. For example, we are working with Olam. Okay, they are in the same space. Yeah, and Olam has developed a very, very unique and very amazing toolkit in terms of how they measure this end-to-end and the traceability of the supply chain, right? So when we started our sustainability journey, we actually learned from them, and we worked with Bain because Bain had worked with Olam, and it clearly demonstrated that we could learn and we could, rather than reinventing the wheel, we could replicate certain things that they have done, which is very useful. And the same approach can be done for the SMEs. Yeah, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to invest additional resources and capital in that. They can actually open source from what has been done. I think that will benefit the entire ecosystem and everybody. So this is my thought in the process. Yeah.
I'll just add on to the comments made. My vision for SMEs in Singapore is that Singapore has always been a small market. It will always be a small market. We need to bring the global market to Singapore, to companies that are operating out of Singapore. And we are hoping that with the growth that the SMEs will see, we will have world-beating companies tomorrow that are no longer SMEs, but giants in the world in the different sectors that they operate. Now, what do we need to do differently as a collective community to get there? I think beyond the programs and everything that I mentioned, and a lot of the good things that platform companies like Boxterra and technology companies like SAP are doing, I think the time has come for us to architect and stitch the ecosystem a lot more deliberately as a collective. I think Paul mentioned the automotive industry. We need to do that for many other segments. Two things. I think the role of the government is to increasingly be an architect of the ecosystem and stitch it together, because we have different vantage points that we can add value. The second thing is that we need to build infrastructure for the ecosystem in the digital world. So we have already done a lot of work in e-invoicing, in corporate identification, in payments, also in trade trust and trade documentation. So we'll continue to work at it from an infrastructure layer perspective, from a government, which is a utility that everyone can use. Then I think the second thing is how do we engineer and catalyze platform companies like Boxterra in different segments to grow and connect and network to the world of opportunities. And then the last point really is how do we work with existing big platforms in B2C, B2B, your Alibabas of the world, your Amazons of the world, your Grabs and Shoppies of the world, to actually bring the SMEs along into a global market and uplift their capabilities in digitalization, sustainability, and others. I think the moment is now, and I think it's going to be an exciting future for SMEs.
Absolutely, Kiran. I think you capped it off perfectly. I think, Arundham, to a point that you were making, I am also a firm believer that competitors can collaborate, and I think to achieve far greater and higher outcomes that outlive us, outlast our organization. So thank you so much. I think this was enlightening, it was enriching, and I'm sure our audience has benefited from these insights. Before we go into audience questions, I'm going to hand over to Keng Kong to share some of his thoughts. So over to you, Keng Kong.
Yeah, so I think, the last comment that Kiran has put together, right, in terms of how we are envisioning the future, right, in terms of the government being the architect and us coming together as a collective group, right, to kind of engineer the changes that we want to see, in terms of the kind of infrastructure that we want to have, right, to support the entire ecosystem. The technology is there right now, right? Like what both Paul has explained in terms of technology being there, whether it's in terms of blockchain solutions or others, right? To be able to give different stakeholders in the ecosystem the confidence right? The confidence in the KPIs that we're tracking, in the information that we are tracking. And perhaps it's also interesting, right, to observe if a open source model like what Arundham has suggested, perhaps in terms of getting innovation out there in the open, and companies like Olam creating models, which then can be shared with a larger community, a bigger ecosystem, in terms of how do they track their end-to-end across the supply chain, right? I think there is a lot of hope for our SMEs here in Singapore as well as in the region. The technology today is such that it enables you to reach a market which you have not imagined before, right? And through network like Boxterra, you're able to connect with buyers and sellers outside of your current market today. So, take advantage of that. Thanks. Over to you, Paru.
I'm just looking at any of the questions coming in. Let's look at the chat. I have one question here. What advice do you have for an SME that is starting out on their sustainability journey? I was hoping to pass that on to Arundham. Is any advice that you have for an SME that is starting out now on their sustainability journey?
Yeah, I think, as I said, sustainability can mean many things to different people, right? So the first thing, you need to understand what is achievable as an organization, what is important, and what moves the needle for you, because you may not be able to achieve everything. So you need to really prioritize and see, and it's a multi-year journey, right? So you need to prioritize that what are the 1, 2, 3 things that I will do right in terms of my year 1, year 2, year 3 plan, so that it's a step forward. I think that is very important. If we try to do too many things at one time, then I think neither we have the resources nor the capital and the technology available. So I think for a start, we need to be very sharp, and priority needs to be really set properly.
Pearl, I'll just pull out. I don't disagree with Arundham. The only thing I would say is I'm also seeing SMEs that are using sustainability as their primary differentiator. So the great thing about an SME is that you don't have the baggage that an SAP or a Dole and these mega companies have, right? Where the complexity of what you're driving is so much greater. So I agree with you, Arundham. Absolutely, you have to be focused and clear about what the outcome is, and be sensible about how you define that. But equally, I think there's an opportunity for you to be more agile and get there faster, and actually use that as a business differentiator. I actually think you'll get there faster than the bigger companies.
No, absolutely, yeah. Paul. And I think it will be important for large corporations also how they choose their suppliers and their partners. Because if you are agile and you move faster on those parameters, then you will be the preferred partner for many large organizations compared to others who are not moving that way. So absolutely agree with your point.
Yeah.
All right, we have one question that's come in from Lokesh, and he asks, what are your thoughts on a marketplace for sustainable procurement? So maybe I will start first by directing this to Kang Song, and then of course anybody else wants to come in.
Oh, sorry, Paru, I didn't really get that question. Can you just say it one more time?
The question from Lokesh is, what are your thoughts on having a marketplace for sustainable procurement?
Well, okay. As a marketplace, we focus on different things, right? Certainly, I think it's all about, it's all about numbers and the different players inside. So what we want to do is actually to have a marketplace where there is a lot of buyers and sellers, right? So as part of the the services that one can offer to this marketplace, could be one of sustainability, right? Whether it is consulting services or whether it is providing certain modeling packages, right? We provide the marketplace and the ability for folks to have to be able to inquire what sort of demand is there out there and what sort of enterprises or companies, if you will, have got that sort of expertise to provide that. So so certainly it can be one of the services or product that one can offer.
I have to just jump in and build on what Kang San said. I think this is a fantastic opportunity. So Boxterra have a network, SAP has a network. We already have filters in our network which allow an organization to direct their spend around certain sustainability measures. So you can, I mentioned it earlier, right? If you want to direct to social enterprises, you can, in the network today, already direct certain spend. A great example of that, if you look at the big mining companies, say in Australia, they like to direct a certain percentage of their spend, say, to the Aboriginal communities and the organizations that they're trying to support as part of that spend network. So it's a brilliant way, the network, to direct spend. The key is that the network has the technological ability to have the transparency to make sure that we can attest that those suppliers that you're directing spend to are also fully legitimate, right? Which comes back to what we said earlier. So in my mind, it already exists. That can significantly grow in terms of how you direct that spend. The tech being the mechanism that gives you that attestation and confidence that the spend is going, to the right companies that you actually want it to go to. The networks do it already.
There is one more point I want to bring forward, Parul, in this discussion is around ESG audits, right? Because again, on the point of how do you actually make sure that what we claim is being done, right? And I think there is a big opportunity here by using technology and standardizing and replicating things at a regional or even a global level, saying that, there is somebody who is actually led by technology innovation, auditing all the SMEs who are partnering and also the large companies who are partnering together and collaborating, saying that, yes, they follow a certain toolkit, a model, a structure, and there is more surety that what they are saying and preaching is actually being done on the ground. Yeah. So I think there is a big opportunity there as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think here's a question I may direct that to you, Kiran. The question is that, someone's referred to the point Arundham made earlier on, collaboration or co-opetition amongst competitors is the way to go on achieving very significant large changes like, the focus on ESG. I think the question here specifically is what needs to be done to expedite co-opetition in Asia? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. I think with the movement of ESG, it is a global movement and it's just gaining momentum. Actually, many big companies are already competing and partnering in many areas outside of ESG. But I think the ESG momentum will only accelerate that. We are seeing big companies working together to come up with standards of how they actually work with their supply chain of SMEs in various areas, because that consistency matters. Because having siloed walled gardens around certain big companies without having consistency across also actually limits the ability to scale this in a meaningful fashion globally. So I think this is an area where there will be a lot of cooperation within industries and actually across industries. And this is where the concept of not just value chains within industry, but ecosystems that straddle across industries. We're seeing more and more of that happen. And I think there's opportunity there for Singapore to play a role to orchestrate some of those from Singapore for Asia.
Thank you, Kiran. Anybody else wanted to weigh in on that? Otherwise, we do have one more question that's come in, possibly the last one, because, and my apologies to the audience, there are a lot of other questions coming in, but I'm not necessarily being able to do justice to all of them right now. But there is a question that says, how can spot buy kickstart the demand side of the journey? And how can the biggest corporate supply chain giants like SAP, ensure that the demand is channelized to smaller SMEs?
I think that one naturally comes to me, but I would love I would love my colleagues to comment. So spot buy is a tech. So we run some really significant networks, and we've worked super closely with Boxterra. What we wanted to do was create again with technology a platform to other large networks, and this is all about the openness and how do you bring an open platform that anybody can participate on. So actually just yesterday we announced the spot buy connection to Amazon, for example, so that everything within the Amazon network becomes available through the SAP network, which if it's connected to the Boxterra network, right, everything becomes available to everybody. So this is crucial. It does require us to have technology standards. We need to do that in a consistent way so that you can ramp on literally millions of suppliers and participants into these networks. So look, we've been building these networks for many, many years. So that we have trillions of dollars of trade going through our networks. We have millions and millions of participants already. And things like spot buy are just essentially giving us the channel to expand that even further into, in this case, for example, the Amazon network that was just, I think, mentioned in the question.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you to our audience. As I said, my apologies, we have not been able to pick up all the questions. We will make an attempt to answer them via chat though. Thank you to the absolutely terrific panelists we've had today. I think what a rich conversation, and let's keep it going. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Gabriel now to close our session this evening.
Well, thank you, Parul, and thank you to all our panelists who have been come on with us live today for the last 1 hour. That was actually a very insightful session, and I would like to thank everybody as well for the questions. Apologies, we can't cover everything within the time which we have, but that being said, we'd like to thank you all for being here today. And before you go, please don't forget to fill out the polling form that will be coming onto your screen shortly. We appreciate if you rate the session, as your feedback is very important to us. And ultimately, it makes it better for you, especially the viewer. With that, we've come to the end of the Green Shoots sessions today. We look forward to everyone joining us again soon. In fact, you can join us again for next week's session if you go to the website right now. And for some of you who have gotten the invite, we are running a very special session around the China Internet Report and the China Fintech ecosystem in collaboration with the South China Morning Post, better than SCMP. It's a very popular report, and they've worked on it this year with Raise Capital, right? Once again, join us again. And for those of you who are still with us right now, if you look on your screen, you'll see a QR code, and you can basically scan it. It'll bring you straight to the website. You can sign up and find out about the upcoming sessions. On another note as well, Singapore Fintech Festival happening 8 to 12 November. Tickets are on sale. Same thing as well, QR code, and you can see the latest developments which we have. And we're going to have actually a few updates coming up very, very soon for you. With that, on behalf of everyone, the panelists, everyone at the behind the scenes, and the team here at SFF, we thank you for your time. Stay safe, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.